Welcome back to Sako and the Moon Horror Podcast, where we explore the strange, the dark, the creatively terrifying. Today, we're stepping into the shadow of one of the most famous monsters ever created. Our guest is Dacre Stoker, a descendant of Bram Stoker, the man whose 1897 novel Dracula helped define the modern vampire. What does it actually mean to inherit a name that has become synonymous with horror? Today, we're talking family legacy, Dracula, the mythology surrounding the Stoker name, and what it's like to live with a monster in your family tree. Welcome, Dacre.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and talk all things Dracula with you guys.
Theme song. There's no words to the theme song. There's supposed to be words.
There's no words to the theme song.
There's no words.
Okay.
Go ahead. Finish what you were saying. Dacre.
So, guys, thank you for having me. This is absolutely awesome. Having seen you guys in person just not too long ago in Kentucky at Imaginarium, now we get to really delve into Dracula because, at these big conventions, it's you're passing lots of other people, but
Oh yeah.
this is a great hour, guys, and I love your interest. So I'm here to chat anything you want about Dracula.
And see, that's the thing about because that's where we've met. We met at Imaginarium. You and I met a few years ago at Imaginarium, and then we reconnected this past July. And that's the thing. We're busy with panels. You're busy with presentations and panels. You've got a booth to run. We don't really get to sit and talk like this. And so I'm really glad we had the opportunity to do that. In case you missed it, this is the Sako and the Moon Horror Podcast. That's Sako. I'm the Moon. And this, of course, is our fantastic guest, Dacre Stoker. Was there anything missing from that intro?
I think you covered it. I'm a descendant of Bram Stoker, the guy who wrote Dracula. But where on the family tree? So just bear with me. Bram was one of 7 children. His youngest brother, George, was my great-grandfather. So that makes me great-grand-nephew. But what's also strange about this is a Victorian family. Bram was born in 1847. There were 7 kids in the family. Only 3 had offspring. Only 2 had offspring still alive today. Bram Stoker actually had a son. Son had a daughter. Daughter got married twice during World War II. Both were airmen and they were shot down. So none survived. But her and the 2 different airmen husbands had 3 kids. Of those 3, 2 are alive and produce offspring. So I do have cousins who are direct descendants. They are not nearly as interested in the legacy of Bram Stoker as I am, but they're very supportive. They are the Bram Stoker estate, which my wife and I co-manage to help them. I wouldn't say exploit, it sounds like a negative word, but really it's help the word understand his legacy and protect and promote Bram's intellectual property. Those things that are not public domain, like Dracula is public domain. So it's not like I have any control over movies about the book or different authors, but yes, Bram Stoker himself is. So, I come from a descendant, and I take this kind of role quite seriously. To try to uphold his legacy in the best way possible. So people understand the man that wrote Dracula, because everybody knows Dracula in some way, shape, or form, but do they really understand Bram? And that's, Dwan and Sako, that's where I want to help, is let's understand the creator. We know the creation, but let's understand the creator a little bit better. He's a very interesting and complex person.
I've sat in on some of your presentations, and I agree. The story behind Bram is quite fascinating. But I want to ask you, of course, because I would assume that if you were the direct descendant, that this would be sort of automatic blood right. But like I said, you're from the same level of family tree, but where were you going to go? What direction were you going before you grabbed the mantle? Before, when you took the mantle, first of all, why did you take the mantle?
Yeah.
Why did you feel this was a responsibility you needed to take? And then where were you going otherwise?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to put it in perspective, this is not a huge family.
Right.
But George Stoker, Bram's youngest brother, had a son and a daughter. That son came to Canada to help actually get involved in business, and he helped start the Montreal Stock Exchange. So he married my grandmother, 3 kids. One of them died in the war, 2 of them still alive, my dad and his brother. So that older brother, my dad died when I was only 23 of lung cancer. So I wouldn't say I was raised by my uncle, but he was the elder statesman in the family. He was the guy that held sort of the mantle, but he was, more into, the bigger picture, the Irish picture, rather than, what was Dracula, because his grandfather actually invented ozone therapy. He was a famous doctor. He was in the Zulu Wars as a doctor. He was also in the Turco-Russian Wars, sort of like the beginning of the Red Cross being sent off to different wars around the world. So he had lots of info about, the Irishness of the family, but didn't really focus in on Dracula until a guy came along in 2003, Ian Holt, and contacted him and said, look, I think it's interesting. I'm working on a screenplay that didn't go anywhere. I'd like to turn it into a book. Would you like to be involved to best represent Bram Stoker? And my Uncle Patty did not have much interest, but he said, you should talk to my nephew. Now, why he picked me, I don't know. I do know that one of the things he was doing at the time was shooting faxes. This is how old it was, to me and my wife, who were interested in the genealogy. And my wife comes from a huge family. And it turns out that, with all these 7 Irish relatives, it was interesting to find out all the connections. Where did they go as the Irish travel around the world? So Patty knew that I had an interest, and he connected Holt to me and said, I'm working on this story. Would you be interested in studying up on Bram Stoker to sort of represent him in my story? Well, that turned out to be the book, Dracula the Undead. And that's why I took a bit of a pause. I was a teacher at the time. I had been doing a number of things. I was coaching modern pentathlon for Canada at the Olympic level. So I had lots of little irons in the fire. But this opportunity just kind of came in my inbox, Dwan. And it sort of like tricked my interest to go a little deeper than I had into family history. And when I did that, I began to find the proverbial rabbit hole. There was more cool things that Bram Stoker did with his brothers and his sisters that ended up helping and complement the writing of his most famous book. And then I started finding out about the other books. Well, that just led me to the Rosenbach Museum in Philadelphia, where Bram's notes are. It led me to different conferences in England and Ireland. Soon enough, the 100th anniversary of Bram's death was upon us in 2012. So it was like, I need to go to Ireland for this big celebration, which it was, meet some of the other family members. I met biographers. I met other people in the field. So it wasn't an intended path. It just sort of opened the door because of my contributions to this book, Dracula the Undead. And I started finding stuff. And we'll get to that later in the show. But when I found stuff, it was like the rabbit hole got more interesting and deeper and deeper. Had I not done that, had I not had the connection to Ian Holt, I probably would have stayed on my track as a teacher of physical education and science and continuing coaching at the Olympic level. But I realized I couldn't do all that together and properly fulfill my responsibility as the family expert in not just Bram, but the other brothers as well and the other sisters. So Jenny and I have really elevated our role as the holders of the torch, so to speak, and become world-renowned experts in Bram Stoker and his family.
It's one of those things that people don't really, I mean, we say it all the time. Everyone says it all the time, but it's like literally just one interaction can literally change the course of your life. You got like essentially one email that completely shifted the full direction of your life.
It's like, they say the pebble that gets thrown into the pond and all the ripples, you can ride that out, or you can just let the pebble drop and go, nah, I'm not into it. But it's also interesting that there was a situation which the school I was at the time was beginning to sort of go in a different direction.
Yeah.
And I felt, you know what, maybe this is the right time. But it was a leap of faith to do something literary that I hadn't done before. I had good backup. Yeah, even though my son was still in high school, he was definitely a serious student of literature. So he started editing my work for me. My wife is a digger when it comes to history and genealogy. So I had a bit of a support network to take that leap of faith and to go in that direction.
So it's almost like, in a sense, the universe had this plan for you and slowly put the pieces of support around you before the plan got executed.
That's very possible. You just look at it that way and it's like, yeah, maybe that's the case.
So one of the things we like to do on this show is give advice to the people who are the independent creative as we are. So what that may be, if we were going to translate that into some sort of advice, is if you have an idea, you have a plan, there's a thing you want to do, surround yourself with helpful people. Go out, seek those who may be able to support you before you hit go on your plan. Have the support system set up. And that can just be the editor friend and the guy who knows this agent over here, or maybe go to a convention and snooze up with an independent publisher from over here and just kind of get yourself out there. And I'm definitely support attending conventions because there's
absolutely.
All sorts of people.
I'm so glad you said that because, we met at Imaginarium and it's such and I'm going to add one more phrase. It's a positive, creative atmosphere is what we need. And going to places like the Imaginarium Convention, or it could be, a book club. It could be a writer's club, any kind of support where you're surrounding yourself with people that have the talent, as Dwan said, but also the positivity to say, yeah, man, go for it, rather than, oh, geez, good luck, man. You got to pay the bills.
Good luck with that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Be aware of the guy who says, good luck with that. Don't just go ahead and distance yourself from that friend. Because I'll tell you, like with everything that I've been doing over the last 5 or 6 years, it started with a buddy of mine saying, do you want to take your writing seriously? Go here. Anyone you're going to want to know, you're going to meet here. Sure enough, there's 3 awards sitting on my shelf. And you actually, thank you, sat in on one of our short films.
Yes. I had no idea when you and I first met. I knew you were a budding author. I didn't know you were getting into film. And then boom, I'm there this year and you guys walk away with an award. And that short film, my God, it blew my mind.
So I have to throw this out here because it was really, really cool. We're sitting in the back row and we're premiering Malice Manor Cribs. And we're sitting in the back row and it's like me, Dacre, James Chaley, and we're sitting here and I look over at Dacre while he's watching the film and his jaw has just dropped the whole time. He's just like, I have to know, what were your thoughts as you're watching? Personally, I have to ask, what were your thoughts as you're watching it?
I thought, first of all, makeup was incredible. Sound effects was incredible. I thought, how do these guys do it? The creation of a film of this level with the people that when you came out and told me later, oh yeah, this was this person, I'm going, wait a sec. How did how can you make those transformations that, as an author and a sports guy, I have no idea how you guys make that magic, but it really was incredible. It really was.
Let me know the next time you're in town. I'll take you up there to the Hart. They'll let you through.
I know. I'd love to. We're actually Dan and Eva of Vamp Chat are actually trying to make something happen where we do it and at some events there. The 3 of us as sort of a the equivalent of a post speakeasy that seems to be really popular around the country. We're trying to make something like that happen with a Bram Stoker Dracula speakeasy. And Malice Manor, I think, would be perfect for it. So,
it would.
But that's how collaborations happen. Interests spark. Oh, that's cool. I see it on the film. Oh, what a great place that would be to do something. Do you have a place where 20 or 30 people could sit if we did something? Oh yeah, we're working on it.
Space for that.
Yeah, it's in the works, my friend.
Yeah, because that is I can't wait. I want that to happen so much because there is so much beauty, and this is a shout out to Joker and Amanda Durkin, who own and operate Malice Manor. That's their place. They've invested so much time, effort, blood, and sweat into building that business, and they've done a great job with it. I can't wait for you to see it. Just as an aside, a lot of that is just them. I think I've babbled on enough. The structured member of the show, Sako, has been so kindly and calmly sitting there for the last 15 minutes. I'm sure you've got something to talk about, don't you?
I do. I have 10 questions that get deeper and deeper into this, into the mind of Dacre and his legacy with Bram Stoker. Are you ready for me?
Fire away. I'm ready.
Okay, let's start with the obvious question. When you introduce yourself as a Stoker, how quickly does someone say, wait, Bram Stoker?
Well, it sort of depends. If I'm in a literary crowd or a film group, it happens probably within about a minute. Although I have been places where it just totally over people's head, and I get it because people know Dracula, they don't know Bram Stoker.
Yeah.
Some of the funniest places it happens when I get into a taxi cab or an Uber in Dublin, Ireland, and I'm arriving in the airport and I'm going to do either some research or I'm going to an event in Dublin, and it's like, oh, and what's your name? And then there's this pause, and they get like, you're not related to the man that wrote the book, did you? Are you? You go, well, as a matter of fact, I am. And then, well, how are you related then? You know what? And so then the conversation starts and it never ends. But it's sort of situational because obviously in literary and film crowds, people get it. But on a daily basis, I can go incognito. It doesn't make a difference.
Do you prefer that?
It sort of depends. If I'm here to do something that has to do with literature, if I'm trying to promote a book or sell some books or get a foot in the door, yeah, I'm going to segue it if they don't do it themselves. But it does sort of get tiring at times if I'm doing something completely different, either in my environmental business, which is taking care of trees. It sometimes helps because people realize I'm serious at what I'm doing, and I've reached a high level in what I'm doing with Bram, and therefore, yeah, he's probably pretty serious about this too. You know, he's just not taking this other stuff at a lark. So sometimes it's nice to be incognito. Other times it shows you've reached a level of proficiency and acceptance as a world expert. It really does help though. But it does bring with that high expectations. And so therefore there's some burdens with that sometimes. And I say that when it comes to making a submission for a book.
Right.
You know, a publisher looks at it. Yeah, I'm putting in here author, international bestseller, and great-grandnephew of Bram Stoker. That usually opens the door. But at the same time, oh man, this thing better good, because the publisher knows that there will be a lot of negativity if the book doesn't hold up. There'll be a lot of people reviewing on social media. Oh man, he's just trying to rip off the family name. He's trying to ride the coattails. So I feel a responsibility to be the guy that is not seen as riding coattail as much as helping blaze the path, helping raise awareness, and holding up my end when it comes to research, storytelling, and so on.
You know, interesting, because I'm a big wrestling fan, and everything comes back to wrestling. That's a big thing in pro wrestling, because you'll have like the son of a popular wrestler or a famous wrestler or a high achieving world champion wrestler. And then when their offspring comes out and wrestles, it's like, not only do you have to be a good wrestler because you're putting on a good show, but you got this name behind you that if you don't perform well, you've essentially, in a sense, tainted the legacy that you've associated yourself with. And that puts such a higher pressure on the generations as they go. There's a wrestling thing going on right now in that same conversation. So do you basically live with that same pressure? Like, I can't just be the average writer when I put out books like Dracul. I can't just be the average writer.
Yeah, no,
Obviously, of course.
you're right. As Aisling, who wrote a comment, she's absolutely right. That's one reason why I am an average writer myself, but I have to connect myself to writers who are really good, like J.D. Barker. Because look, I went to school for science and physical education. At my age, I'm not going to become an amazing writer. I'm going to become good enough to hold my own when I supply text, supply information, give outlines, give ideas, but actually being able to weave them together, I'll be honest, I need to collaborate, and I've done some good ones with J.D. Barker, and you guys know John Polisano. We've got a good one in the works, Levered Butts. We've got some more coming out. So
we're
we've
going
got
to talk about that one later. Yeah,
we will, but that's I've accepted my limitations, but I need to be cognizant of who helps me reach that.
I feel like that's a very important thing for just any writer to really acknowledge. It's like, because again, I think there's a state where people forget that regardless of how big a celebrity name is, they're really just a person. We're just all average people. We're all average people. So I think there's a sort of like this, maybe a disconnect where the average writer will sit there and be like, I have to be so great because this person is obviously so great. But to hear a Stoker say, I'm just an average writer, I consider myself an average writer, right? And I would never put myself, generally speaking, on the same level as someone with such a name. But that's just the reminder. We're all just writers, whether you have this great publishing deal or you're an independent author, self-publishing. We all have the right to put our work out. We all have a voice worth hearing.
Yep.
And, how good you are is really subjective anyway. So put all the work out. You got a work you want to put out, a film you want to put out, a book you want to put it out. Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah.
Right? You have a voice and it deserves to be heard. And I think it's really humble of you to say that. I'm just an average writer. But I think it's also very honest and real and reminds everyone else, just like, hey, anyone, we all can, so we all should try. There's enough space on the shelf for all of our books.
Sure there is, yeah.
So Ashling says, I think a writer will excel in their own way. We each have our own strengths, and it's true we won't be as good as the same things as others. And it's really, I think, a freeing thing not to seek perfection in every aspect of writing. We can only do what we as individuals can do.
Yeah. And I think it's The Queen's Gambit, for example. I think that was a book that came out and didn't get anywhere close to popular until like 30 years later after Netflix made a series about it.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, great series. Fantastic. If you've not sat down and watched The Queen's Gambit.
No, I have. I love it.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
What was the relationship with Dracula growing up? Was it something that was always around in the family, or did you eventually discover that your last name came with a rather enormous shadow?
So it's so disappointing to people to realize we weren't like the Munsters, growing up in Mockingbird Lane. It was a very sort of average, childhood in Montreal, Canada. But at the age of about 12 or 13, when somebody came to the door and go, "Oh, the Stoker house, are you going to take our blood or give us candy?" And that I actually asked my dad, what the heck are they talking about? And so he went to the library, kind of as I'm pointing here, and he pulled a book out of the shelf. And unlike this one, which is a reproduction,
Right.
The actual one he pulled out is sitting in my safe, was a first edition of Dracula signed by Bram to his mom that's been passed down to my dad. And that's when he said, "You see this book? Your great granduncle wrote that. It's been a bestseller, blah, 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 and lots of movies have been made of it." But that didn't really change a thing. It's not like we all dressed up as Dracula. I went off to boarding school, and I do remember on one of those Friday night movies in October, the Fearless Vampire Hunters was featured. And it's sort of at the credits, it said something about, loosely based on Bram Stoker's Dracula. And all my friends, as they will do, when you're 14 or 15 at boarding school, you know, they kind of put you in a headlock and give you noogies. Stoker, it's you. And that was about it. You know, there wasn't in the late 70s a whole lot of information or even saturation anywhere close to what it is now in popular culture film. Yeah. Obviously, they didn't have the internet, didn't have streaming, none of that. So you didn't have as many opportunities unless you were privy to going to libraries and finding the biographies. And those biographies were few and far between. McNally and Florescu were starting to write stuff that ended up pointing the finger at Bram Stoker and understanding Vlad Dracula and so on and so forth. So fast forward, I'm in university. That's when I decided, because I had to take a English literature course and we had to write a paper on an author. So it's like, okay, I'm at a university. It's got a good library. It's now time to take this opportunity to dig. And that's when I got my feet wet a little bit. And again, that's sort of like late 70s, early 80s. And then I'm in the university, heavily into preparing for the Olympics and all that. Couldn't give a damn about any of the other stuff. Yes, I watched a couple of films, you know, when it came Halloween time.
I'm sure.
But again, no streaming. You had to go to a theater, you know, all that stuff. And so it didn't really become a big part of the family life until 2003, until I started saying, okay, now's the time to do the research. And I had the availability of Google and then getting on a plane, you know, and flying to Dublin, Ireland, or Philadelphia or Seattle, Washington to go to different archives, meet people that had stuff, or to conferences and start meeting people. So nothing like it is now, or with a bookshelf like you see behind me, where life now, you know, is like, what's the next cool thing coming out? Who's writing what about it? And I will say, just before we get off the subject, it does sort of dominate life when I'm on certain Facebook pages or Instagram pages and I see people making ridiculous claims about the way Bram Stoker wrote Dracula. They get them confused towards the 92 Coppola film, or they say something outlandish that I feel an obligation to, in a nice way, not get in an argument, because that never works on social media, but just say, by the way, you may be interested to know that my great-granduncle did this, and I found the books he used, or this is where he learned about it. So it's being tactful, but also putting myself forward as a resource to sort of help people better understand. And then I have a better opportunity when I give these sort of hour lectures at places that Duan was talking about. And I've had some pretty cool opportunities to travel around the world to help set the record straight or give interesting insight, behind the scenes insight, go weird places to tell people who, you know, are somewhat interested.
There's a strange difference between inheriting someone's name and inheriting someone's legacy. Do you feel like you're carrying Bram Stoker's legacy, or do you think yourself as simply another person in the tree?
Well, I could have been a branch without a whole lot of activity, but funnily enough, I was named after a guy named Dacre Stoker, who was a cousin of Bram's, who was a very famous World War I Irish submarine commander on loan to the Australian Navy, involved in the Battle of Gallipoli, taking the first submarine in World War I up the Dardanelles Canal. So before I even knew anything about Bram, my parents had met this guy on their honeymoon. And his widow, when he died in 1962, I was only born in 58, so I didn't get a chance to meet Dacre Stoker, but I inherited all of his scrapbooks and unbelievably cool stuff that he wrote while he was in prison, in Turkish army prison, after his submarine was sunk and he had to get out and so on. Spy notes and stuff to the British that you'd have to hold over a candle to make the words come out. I mean, really cool, World War I stuff. So long story short, I knew there was something associated with the name Stoker that I needed to uphold, that there was some interesting legacy there, but it sort of took on another sort of trajectory when I became and freely associated myself with Bram Stoker as one of his great grandnephews. That I do feel kind of as I sort of said in my social media thing, is I do feel a responsibility to sort of, in a nice way, set people straight. It's like if any of you two, were hearing things about your family members that were inaccurate, even though they may not have written a Dracula book, you want to set the record straight. Hey, what? No, or a friend. Hey, guys, that's not right. It's this. Oh,
and I've done that.
Yeah, and there's a way to do it, so it's not going to be too antagonistic, but it's an information passing on in a nice way. So yeah, it's important to me.
Because there's a way to do it that's going to be received. If you just automatically throw rocks, no one's listening to you anyway.
Right.
But now of course I have the question. There's so much work that you've done to kind of put out the story of Bram. Is there anything that you have planned to do to put out the name of Dacre? Not you, but because that's sounds like a great story. It sounds like you have amazing resources there. Do you have any plans on putting anything out for your namesake?
Funny you ask, and this is not a plug, promise, but Dacre Stoker actually wrote a book called Straws in the Wind. And that actually was a book about his life and the sort of the metaphor of, life is like straws in the wind. You don't know where it's going to take you. And where it took him was World War I, Turkish prison, escaped, captured, who finally made it home after the war, surface ship in World War II, became an actor. At 77 years old, became the Irish croquet champion. All sorts of interesting things this guy did. And so the scrapbooks that I inherited, I realized were deteriorating in front of my eyes. You open it up and the pages fall apart.
Yeah.
So I had a friend take photographs and digitize them. So they were all on a series of DVDs.
Right.
About the same time that somebody in Australia was commissioned by the Australian War Command to write a book about Stoker. So I had all the info. I could just send him copies, mailed him copies of the DVDs. And that's become a short documentary film out of this guy's book called Stoker's Submarine by Fred Brenchley. But just 3 months ago, I was contacted by another screenwriter in Australia who is working on a project. And because of an NDA, I can't tell you everything, but I'm just saying this. Serious guy in the film world, has done serious works that have made it onto streaming and the big screen, who has a screenplay in the works for a feature film about this submarine and Dacre Stoker. So I'm supplying the guy info because that's a project I don't have to initiate, and starting a film project at that scale, Dwan, as you know how hard it is at any level.
At any level, yeah.
I'm supplying him info, and I think that's, as my wife points to me, says, yes, you do need to give him this stuff, and we need to get credit for it, but we don't need to charge them money for it, because just get it out there, because it is part of my responsibility for my godfather, my namesake, to get it out there. And it, that it's a kind of cool parallel, because if that's elevated, then people will want to come back to me and go, what are you doing? Well, let me tell you also about Bram, or let me tell you about the tours I lead to Romania, where I help people get a feel for where Bram set the story, or Whitby, England, 2027. I'm leading a tour to where Bram spent a holiday and got inspired to write Dracula, or Cruden Bay, Scotland, where he actually did the writing of it. And those things to me are really interesting, to help people feel the location. Reading a book is one thing, but actually physically being there and seeing the desk he wrote on, or seeing the room that he wrote these things in, or standing on these places outside a castle that he had pictures of, or looking at the maps that actually helped to plot the whole thing out. That's the next level, and that's so cool.
That is so cool. Like, I knew nothing about your namesake. Like, that's nothing that I've heard question about. Anything Dacre Stoker is you. So It's really cool to hear that there's a whole separate, an entirely separate legacy that's surrounding you. That's
You
gotta be
could just
fun.
Google Dacre Stoker submarine guy, and that'll bring you there. It's
Look at
not me.
Dracula has become so much bigger than the original novel. Movies, television, costumes, Halloween, romance novels, vampire rules, sparkly vampires, sexy vampires, terrifying vampires. What do you think Bram would make of what his creation became?
That's the one question when people say, if you could sit down and have dinner with Bram Stoker and ask him one question, or if you could just and so obviously I have to create an answer on what I've learned about Bram. I found his journal when I was digging around for information on him. It was actually in his great grandson's attic, and they didn't know really what it was because the handwriting was so bad, but I got help in transcribing it. So I feel I understand how he's wired. I've read everything I can find that he's written, his short stories, articles he's written, looked at his life. I think, Sako, he would have been, in a humble way, extraordinarily proud because he was a creative. He was a poet. He was a writer. He was involved in theater for 27 years as the manager for Henry Irving. He would have sensed that when you create something and you have a 130-year run of it, sort of like Les Mis and Cats and everything else all tied into one, that would have been awesome. That what came out of his research, what came out of his 7 years of research and very painstakingly accurate research to create a story that changed the world would have made him feel really good. But he would not necessarily have been raising a flag or, look at me. And I say that because he was humbly the manager of the first actor knighted for his contributions to the stage and never seek the limelight himself. That was Sir Henry Irving. He was always happy to be in the background in a supporting role, making sure Irving was seen in the right light, saying the right things to the right people at the right time, organizing everything. I think Bram would have been, much like me. He would have been interested to talk about it. He would have shined the light on people like you guys here and your listeners who get inspired by his story and want to take it in a different direction. Oh, what can I do with Mina Harker? She was so cool. I'd like to write a story about Mina. Or Lucy Westerner. She died too young in the story. Let me see what happens if she comes back. Or what's the origin of Quincy Morris, the American? I had no idea Bram had any interest in America. And all those things have spurned everything, Sako, you said. Movies, theaters, it's inundated popular culture in so many ways. It's so reachable. I mean, kids learn how to count with Sesame Street, with Count the Count.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's there. It's permeated so many elements of popular culture that I think Bram would be sitting back there going, by golly, I've done it. I've done it. I've done it well, and happy about that.
I could only imagine. I'm also a behind the scenes kind of guy. You won't see me on screen very often. They got me once. But I can just only imagine to have like the time it takes to create a character and then see it morph into what Dracula has become. The idea of the vampire synonymous with Dracula, even non-Dracula vampires like Lestat. Lestat's not Dracula, but if you say vampire, someone's going to think Dracula before they think Lestat.
Yeah.
So it's just that is the groundwork of the vampire, and I just think like that is just so mind-boggling. Like to think if that was your creation, to think like, wow.
So let's just agree upon this because I'm glad you brought that up. He didn't invent the vampire in literature; others did, but he packaged it at the right time because there was a lot of interest in the occult when he wrote Dracula. There was interest, this sort of this jockeying for position between religion and science in England at the time, where people were beginning to look at superstition. They were looking at spiritualism, seance, the afterlife, all this good and bad, the devil. So he packaged it in a way that was almost to the point it was believable. And if you do look at the reviews, and luckily I've met people like John Edgar Browning, the professor who's found all these 100 reviews of Dracula, so we know what it was like at the time in different countries that had their own versions of supernatural creatures, that there was this underlying feeling that there is something more to life and death and as we know it in our present consciousness. And so as you move on, what happens to the soul or our spirits, and that Bram sort of touched on that in a way that is now vague enough when the book was written that it leaves plenty more opportunity for it to be fleshed out. I've often thought that if his Dracula became so well known in that novel, in those 400 and some odd pages, he was only appeared in about 25% of the novel. He was in the head of all the characters. So if we got to know him so well, we might have been tired of him by the second sequel, and that's it. But we haven't, and he's left it. Bram has left it to interpretation, which has created a cottage industry in Romania. Oh, he's not Vlad the Impaler. Yes, he is Vlad the Impaler. He didn't drink blood. Oh, yes, he did. Oh, he was bloodthirsty. That just is more fodder for discussion about where did Bram find him. And so, you've got that, and now you've got just so many other spinoffs, as Sako said earlier. So, no, it's all good, and that's why a character being created is left in a positive way to be inspiring and reinvented by so many other people in so many directions.
And I think that's such a good motivator for any other creative in whatever medium you're creating, to just, whatever the idea is, just go with it. Who knows what can become of it? Just do it. Just go out there and put it out there.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's where things get weird. If Bram Stoker had never written Dracula, what do you think the modern horror landscape would look like? Would something else have filled the cultural void?
Okay, so John Polidori wrote The Vampire 1819, 1820.
Spelled with a
like
Y.
Yeah. J. Malcolm Reimer, Varney the Vampire, and Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu wrote Carmilla. All great stories. So I don't think we would not have had a vampire. Somebody may have figured out the connection that Bram found, which was Vlad the Impaler in a couple of books was referred to as the devil, and made that wonderful connection to the occult and that sort of thing, and used the name Dracula. Somebody may have found it eventually, because Transylvania, that province of Romania, had very strong superstitions in existence that Bram found from Emily Gerard, the Scottish writer, in his research. So they may have been drawn to Romania, and then when they go to Transylvania, then they don't have to go very far to Wallachia, which is the province right next door where Vlad the Impaler is from. So would they have found a Dracula guy? They probably would have eventually, Sako, because if you think of all the ones that people like Anne Rice and Charlene Harris and everybody else has found, there would have been some sort of, archetypal vampire. He may or may not have been called Vlad, but my God, there's been so many other really good ones. Does it really matter? Really? I don't want to discount what Bram did, but somebody would have filled that void. If you could just, sort of surgically remove Count Dracula from the equation, I think something would have filled it, primarily because we all have some kind of a fascination with learning more about what happens to us after death. and that immortality issue that gets brought up in all these different cultures that have, oh, we need to make sure that the soul rests at peace. If it doesn't rest at peace, it's going to be floating around searching for peace, or it's going to be mischievous and doing something bad if somebody has done something bad to it during its lifetime. So that concept of immortal life after death would have taken probably, other shapes over the last, century or so that may not have been quite as successful as my Uncle Bram, but it probably would have been pretty damn cool anyway.
I think it's a fair response. Very fair response.
Okay, so Dwan knows that I am a stickler for making it an hour show. However, we can keep going. Is there anywhere that you have to be at the top of the hour, Dacre?
No, but I do have some meetings I have to get to at the bottom of the hour. So let's at least try to cut this off somewhere by 12:15 at the latest.
Okay. I have a surprise for you. I have 5.
It's a new car. No.
It's a new car. And you get a new car, and you get a new car. I have 5 rapid fire questions that I'll just shoot off right off.
Oh, nice.
Sorry, I just remembered that was up there.
The Dracula ducky.
That's a Dracula duck. My vampire duck is Count Duckula. He's up there.
Nice.
Yes, I loved Count Duckula.
I
Okay.
completely threw you off. I am so sorry.
Oh, yes.
Count Duckula. That's a whole different conversation. Go ahead, Sako.
All right. She's going to hit me with the rapid fire questions, but I got to turn around and
So
see.
first thing that comes off the top of your head.
Okay.
And we're just going to whir through it. Favorite Dracula adaptation?
I like the 92 Coppola.
Ooh. Favorite vampire outside of Dracula?
Oh, I like the guy, and I forget his name, but the one in Last Voyage of the Demeter. I don't even know if he had a name, but he was so monstrous. It was unbelievable.
Brilliant. Castle or crypt?
Oh, I'm a castle guy. I'm claustrophobic. Got to be a castle.
Would you survive one night in Dracula's castle?
Hell yes. No problem.
Garlic, crucifix, or wooden stake?
No, I'm a little aggressive. I like the wooden stake.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for doing that. Before we let you escape the castle, tell everyone where they can find you.
Well, okay. So, DacreStoker.com has information about myself and some of the things that I do. My wife and I run BramStokerEstate.com, which actually has the books and other cool ephemera that you can buy, but it also has all kinds of factual information on the Stoker family, not just Bram, but the whole family. On Facebook and Instagram, Dacre Stoker author. And I'm pretty approachable and I try to answer a lot of things. But if you go to Dacre Stoker, just Dacre Stoker, that was hacked some years ago and I can't get rid of it on Facebook. And I see that people go there for logical reasons and messages get stuck there for ages. So those are places to find me that I will respond.
Is there anything you'd like to promote?
Because there are projects you got in the works, sir.
Yeah, I would love the opportunity to talk about. There's 2 books. One is actually with a publisher right now. It's called The Ally of Madness, and it is historical-based fiction. The summer Bram Stoker wrote Dracula while he was in Cruden Bay, Scotland, and I've been there twice. I know all the places. I know where he was. He was there for 11 summers. So that is with Hellbound Books at the moment, and that'll be at the end of September. One that is actually completed, and it's a great story because John Polisano, who is a good friend, who used to be the president of the Horror Writers Association, he and I reconnected at Imaginarium a couple of years ago and thought, the time is right for both of us to do my first non-vampire horror story. And one of the things that I do a lot of when I need to get away from all this stuff is go fly fishing in wonderful places around the world. And I've gone to Alaska a couple of times. And one of those particular trips didn't go very well as far as the personalities of the trip and accidents and things that happened. And it made me think a little bit about the old film Deliverance and another one called The Edge, Anthony Hopkins and a bear in Alaska. So John and I co-authored a story based on real things that happened, non-vampiric, but very horrifying. And then that is in the hands of the agent. So it's all done and it's being shopped around. And then if you like all the stuff you've been hearing me talk about, why not consider coming on one of my tours with me to either Romania or Whitby? So this coming October 27th through November 2nd is a 5-day tour in Transylvania with Mysterious Adventure Tours. You can just Google them, Mysterious Adventure Tours. It also involves October the 30th, a vampire ball in Bran Castle. That's why I kind of laughed, Sako, when you said, would you survive a night in Dracula's castle? Hell yeah.
Well, here we are.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a dress up, really cool thing there. And then in May of 2027, Experience Transylvania, which is another tour company I work with, we're organizing a 4-day visit to Whitby, England, where Bram actually spent a summer holiday, 3 weeks in 1890 when he started writing Dracula. And he set chapter 6, 7, and 8 there. And then we hop on a plane and fly over to Transylvania for 5 more days. So the 2027 is the 130th anniversary of Dracula. So we got some pretty cool things planned. And that duo, Whitby, Transylvania with Experience Transylvania is in the works. So you can contact me on any of those socials. I'll give you more details. But yeah, those things, those tours are great because you get to just hang out with me and other people, like-minded people who like to do these sort of literary venture travels. That would be fun. But thank you for asking about other ways to sort of spend time with me or get information about my Uncle Bram.
We are super excited. I was super excited personally when you told me that you're working with John Palisano, who was on this show, good friend of ours. And I'm just like, that's gonna be good work. Like it can't not be good work with you guys working together. John Palisano, such a great dude, and it's great to hear you guys working together. That book is being shopped around, so we don't have any idea of when we're going to look at that.
No, we don't know yet. Other than our name, our present working title is Mercy, and the short little synopsis is the guide on a fishing trip had some weird history. And if ever any of your listeners have been guided by anybody, and it could be close to you're sitting in a hair salon getting your hair cut or having your hair made, you're in the hands of somebody else and you got to trust them. You go off to Alaska on a 1-week remote fly fishing trip, you are in the hands of somebody who you've seen on the internet or got a recommendation, and you have no idea how they well or poorly they handle stressful situations or accidents or stuff like that. And having done a number of those in different parts of the world, I've always thought, what happens if stuff really goes downhill? And what are you made of to take care of yourself and those people around you under really difficult conditions? And so John and I ramped it up a little bit and have turned it into a very unique sort of horror film where the two main characters, based on myself and my buddy that I go around the world with, have to deal with some really difficult decisions to make.
That sounds incredible. I can't wait for that.
I can't wait. Lastly, we review a movie every Thursday at 3 p.m. That our guest recommends for us to watch. It's usually a horror movie of some kind. If you were to recommend a horror movie for us to review, what would you recommend and why?
Okay, so you guys, you kind of did a little, your eyebrows went up when I mentioned Last Voyage of the Demeter.
Mhm.
I'm not sure. Have you reviewed that one yet?
No, I haven't seen it.
So here's what happened. This film came out. It's the portion of the novel Dracula that is mentioned in the book. It's the ship that is bringing Count Dracula and his boxes of dirt to come to England. And Bram mentions the ship's log, and it's very vague as to what actually happens. So what's happened is this has been turned into, years ago, a comic, and then the screenwriters took a long time, years to do this, to fill in the gaps. And what I like about it is they created narrative that's seriously based on the kernels that Bram left, and made a very compelling story. And a lot of people said it's a lot like the film Alien with Sigourney Weaver, where they're stuck in space and they've now got a monster in the space in the spaceship. You're now on a ship. Spoiler alert, there's Dracula on the ship, and if you're going to get off, you're in deep trouble. You can't get off. You can't escape it. But the strange thing about the film is it came out during the writer's strike and the actor's strike. So nobody was able to promote it.
Yeah.
And they put it out in an August, which was not really a great time for a horror film. So I was contacted by Universal and said, would you help promote the thing? I said, well, I want to see it first. So they sent me a link. I could watch it on my laptop. I was like, holy smokes, this is great. And then they said, well, why don't you go to Augusta, Georgia? There's a theater there that's going to show it. We'll give you a private screening and bring a bunch of your friends. Boy, was I popular in my area to say, free movie. All you got to do is come here and chat with the people from the news paper about what you thought about it. So I thought it was very faithful to Bram Stoker's novel, even though it's not adapted from the book, because there's not much written about it. But what they did was what they had, they were faithful to it. And the vampire creature is not a lovey-dovey romantic Dracula, even though those are okay. But this one is really badass. So I would highly recommend you guys see Last Voyage of the Demeter and review it. And if you want any sound bites, just ask me. I'll send you some stuff, because I think it's pretty darn good.
All right.
Wicked.
I'm writing it down so I don't remember.
Brilliant. It might be on Tubi.
It's not on Tubi. I just looked. We'll have to find it on Prime.
I think it's on Prime. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Anything else that you want to?
I know one other quick thing I want to say.
You got time? Go for it.
Yeah. So the reason I'm not, you know, when you ask where is this project at a certain point, and it's semi-complete. So over the last 3 years, I've been working with a filmmaker, Jason Figgis, in Dublin, Ireland, October 11 Pictures, to do a documentary about Bram Stoker. And
Sweet.
We're at the point where we have a cut of it that's being looked at by his agent, Jason's agent in Hollywood, to see if this thing can't get sold and put onto streaming networks in documentary areas. I've felt over the years that there hasn't been there's been some okay documentaries, but they haven't have enough breadth to them to really sort of cover all the things about Bram's life, his research and his writing, and the insight that he got from different books that have been found. So I was able to provide a lot of the up-to-date info that I have used in my Stoker on Stoker, The Mysteries Behind the Writing of Dracula, into this up-to-date documentary film. And what a lot of people don't know is he used a lot of his imagination, but so much of it also was that he was so meticulous that he left a list of 26 books in the back of his notes of all the books he used for his research. And these books were found in the London Library that he was a member of. but because they haven't been listed, like London Library moved locations after bombings and fires after World War II. So it wasn't easy for someone in the London Library just to go and look at, let me look at the books Mr. Stoker checked out. They didn't have that book anymore.
Right.
It took a guy that I got to know, Philip Spedding, who was a big fan of Dracula and had purchased a copy of Bram Stoker's notes on Dracula because he knew Bram was a member of the library. And he opened up the back of the notes and he could see all 26 books listed. And he walked through the library and found all 26 books in general circulation, pulled them out. Okay, at one point, Mr. Stoker looked at these, but then he found things underlined and notes in the margins. And then he contacted me. And then I went and took pictures of those. I flew over there and looked at all these notes in the margins and cross-referenced them to the notebook itself and to Dracula. So it's like, here's his source. Here's what he took notes of it. Here's how he used it in the novel. And I've made all these connections. Those are some of the cool things, not only in my lectures, but now in this documentary film, co-authored with John West. John and I wrote the script together, and Jason Figgis did the editing and the directing. And fingers crossed, it gets picked up by somebody. Obviously, if it doesn't, it's still we're gonna have it screened in places.
Right.
We may have to recut it. Who knows? Depending when you get feedback from different streaming entities, they say, "Oh, it's great, it's too long," or add this to it. So we're at that stage where it's still malleable, but I'm really excited that I've been able to take my info from my presentations that I have a lot of fun traveling around the world to do, but someday I'm going to stop doing that. And if it's in a film, it'll still have a life of its own.
I've sat in on some of your other podcast interviews. I didn't get a chance to stick through the entire Stoker on Stoker. I had a panel to go to, but I loved what I heard. And taking the notes from here and comparing it to the original writings. You've been doing that, and you put that in this book, didn't you? I'm
so glad. Okay, a little plug at the end here. Can we do that?
That's what we're doing.
Okay, so you're holding up Dracula annotated for the 120th anniversary. Everything I just said about those books, those notes, Robert 18 Basang, a top scholar in the world, no longer living, mind you, we created this one and put back in all the things that Bram had either taken out himself or his editor had taken out from his original manuscript.
Let's see, we can see this. I got the bookmark.
Yeah. So
you have little.
Yeah.
So
you got
talk to us about the highlighted parts here.
Yeah. So what you've got is a page that has grayscale on the paragraphs that were taken out to create the abridged edition. Now, can you quickly flip through and look for anything in the book underlined? And one of the hints is that original ending. So anything that's underlined in this edition was actually crossed out by hand in the typed script that's owned by the Paul Allen estate.
How well we can see.
So there you go. There you go.
Yeah, okay.
You see it's underlined. So we wanted the readers to see it, so he didn't do strike through. We underlined, but in the typescript that the Paul Allen estate owns, Bram or somebody else's editor had crossed out things to reduce. So when we found, J.D. Barker and I found the typescript, it started at page 102. So we know 101 pages were taken out. What we reconstructed in this book that Dwan's looking at is we have notes that prove what was taken out of those 101 pages. And spoiler alert, one of them is chapter 2, the story Dracula's Guest, that was published in 1914 by Bram's widow and available at bramstoker.org for free, as with everything else Bram wrote for free is at bramstokers.org. So you can read Dracula's Guest as a standalone story, which was the original chapter 2 of Dracula. We also inserted in the first chapter 1 and 3, not as a full narrative, because I didn't feel like it's my place to write Bram's words. We put the evidence, the exact notes and references to chapter 1 and 3 in that book that Dwan has, in addition to the original ending of the novel that was edited out.
And see, I didn't know that bramstoker.org what's the thing? I didn't even know that was a thing where you could tell us more about that site before we go.
So it's a university professor, Paul McDonough, that has listed all the things. Project Gutenberg, which you've probably heard about, is public domain books. So he took all of Bram's public domain stories, and it's available at bramstoker.org. It's fantastic. You could read the stories, you could reference them, because everything he wrote that we found, with the exception of Bram's journal and Gibbet Hill, which was found just a little while ago, is public domain. So there it is, free for the reading.
There you go.
There's your hot tip for the day that won't cost you a penny.
Won't cost you a penny.
But the one that Dwan had, $22 paperback at Amazon. And it really is, if you're thinking of reading Dracula but want all awesome insight, it's there.
This is the one.
Thanks.
Or if you've been a big fan of it forever and ever and ever, amen, this is a fantastic addition. So you get even more of the story that you've loved so much.
Along with 1,100 footnotes. So
lots of notes.
There's a lot in there.
But I love those kind of things. I love to know more about it, which I think wraps this interview up so well, because part of what you said at the beginning was you know, so many people know about Dracula, but they don't know about Stoker, okay? And learning more about him. And as a writer, I love to know about the writings, but the writer as well. What motivated the writer? What inspired the writer? I would love to have seen in some of my favorite books by some of my favorite authors, Dan Brown, Douglas Adams. I would love an edition of the Hitchhiker's Guide like this with Douglas Adams's notes in it. I would love that, because I mean, you get more insight into the author, what influenced the style, not just the finished page. Because once you get into writing, you understand how many things get changed in the process. But to understand like the raw works, I mean, that's so invaluable. It's like, I can't even formulate the words for like how special that is for someone who writes and loves the craft of writing, to just understand what is going through the minds of someone who you respect and honor in that creative space. And I love that, you know, a book like this exists. So to writers everywhere, thank you for this.
Thank you. That's the best plug I could ever ask for. I appreciate it, man.
And that brings us out of the darkness for this episode of Sako and the Moon Horror Podcast. A huge thank you to Dacre Stoker for joining us and taking us behind the name, the mythology, and the legacy of the mythology and the legacy of one of horror's most enduring monsters. Dracula may have been born on the page, but clearly the story didn't stay there. Thank you for listening to us as we explore the dark, the strange, the creatively terrifying. And remember, stay bold, stir fear, and keep the shadows near.
Theme song.